Okay, everybody, I'm going to get started. I know there's a little bit of a breeze, so I'm going to try to keep my back to the wind. It's not to the audience, sorry about that. Just kind of helping us out here. Hi, my name is Shawn Lum, and I am the director here at the Eastern California Museum. And it is a great pleasure to have a new exhibition today, especially because we have the curator with us and some of the friends of the honoree whose exhibition is here. So I am very happy to have you here with us. I know it's really windy and I know it's a bit cold, but maybe this helps us to remember how special it is when we are in the backcountry and exploring, and sometimes we have to make a few adjustments. So hopefully we'll have that as a takeaway from today. All right, so this exhibition is Smoke Blanchard, Mountain Ramblings, Picnics, and Pilgrimages, and it was curated by our speaker tonight. He put together a lot of research on this exhibition. He spent just so much time writing and collating and curating because Andy Selters is a very special climber himself, a mountaineer in his own right, who's written several books on mountaineering. His work, Way to the Sky, kind of a tome for a lot of people on a guide to the history of mountaineering on the West Coast and certainly in America. And he's also written a lot of books through Wilderness Press and other places that I think most of us are familiar with. He's also a friend of Smoke's nephew, James Blanchard, who isn't with us today, but did contribute quite a bit to this exhibition. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest curator for the exhibition, Andy Selters.
Thank you, Shawn. Let me, are we hearing okay out there? I also want to thank all the staff at the museum here. Heather Todd, Kelly Barr, Roberta Harlan, and Dave Kirk volunteered. And I also want to thank Skander, who many of you knew. Skander actually helped me get this started by doing a little video that we posted online for the GoFundMe that allowed me to get the picture, all of Smoke's pictures scanned, and that's what, kind of got this thing rolling. And also John Klusmeyer is here. He was the director before Shawn. And so thanks to all those, it's a little bit of a village thing for sure. Pardon me. Okay, so I am at times climbing historian, and I just wanted to share a little bit of perspective. My perspective on history is that really what's most important is our present moment. And this would fit with Smoke as a Buddhist. And so my criteria is accuracy, as deep as we can figure out, and relevance to our current time. And so in that way, I hope we can go through the exhibit. I encourage you to read all the time I put into the text and finding the pictures. And because that's, we set aside our time to do some reading, basically. It seems so rare in this day and age. But that's what I'm here for. Okay. So it's been my good fortune as a historian to interview and meet a lot of really great climbers. And I find it really interesting to notice, how different climbers, and all of us are climbers in some way or another, gravitate towards different types of mountains, different lengths of excursions, different outings. And, you can say, well, Fred Beckey, he climbed hundreds, if not thousands of peaks and just kept going. And, that's his character. And Peter Croft would, put up amazing stuff that's just his character. And I think we can say that with Smoke. Before I ever moved here, I was friends with Galen Rowell, and we were guiding together over in Nepal, and kind of just, there's a lot of hassles in guiding. And did some of that, but he says, my heart's not in guiding. And I said, sometimes it's just, dealing with the public at an industrial scale can be weird. And he says, but some people, it's right in their blood. And that's the first time I ever heard the name Smoke Blanchard. He says, yeah, there's this guy down in the Sierra, Smoke Blanchard, who it's in his blood. I said, okay, cool. And then when I moved down here, I was friends with James Wilson, and James had said, "Man, it's just you should have met like 7 months ago, 7 months before I moved down here. You know, this guy Smoke passed away." And so I had a couple. That was the whole anecdotes I knew of Smoke Blanchard. And so then 4 years ago, James Blanchard, Smoke's nephew, called me up and said, "I want to hand you off 7,000 slides and, you know, like 6 photo albums and bunches of information that was my uncle's. One of the most important persons in my life was Smoke Blanchard." And I hemmed and hawed, like, that's a big job, and let's get in the museum here. And I finally, you know, he twisted my arm, he drove all the way down. So it's this whole thing actually is owed to Jim Blanchard. There's one picture of him in there when he the transformative trip of his life. Smoke grabbed him when he was like 13 from his brother in Portland, and they all drove up to Alaska together. And James had the time of his life and later on to become an outdoor leader in Oregon and Outward Bound and the university programs up there. And that started giving me the clue of how, you know, we can catalog Smoke's climbs a little bit here, and the cragging in the Sierra, and the peaks in the Sierra, and peaks in Alaska, and peaks in Japan. But really what Smoke's, as my, you know, distant understanding, is he was about bringing people into the mountains. He took more joy, I think, in seeing other people in the mountains and leading them in a safe and interesting way and into their own better nature. Smoke was an intellectual. You can talk to Doug Robinson here about how many books on Eastern religion and all kinds of philosophy and stuff just filled a whole shelf in Smoke's house. So I'd like to emphasize that while we can say, oh, Smoke was the pioneer rock climber of the Eastern Sierra, and he was. My reading of Smoke is that there are no boxes that he was really contained in. There was, you know, he had a hard time with clubs that were official. You know, the East Willow Alpine Club was the most unofficial club ever, and that seemed to fit with Smoke's character. It's like you meet the mountains directly, and then you find out more about who you are. You find out more about the mountains, and it's that interaction that we each create. Smoke was maybe one of the most creative outdoor people I can think of. You know, walking across California, climbing Denali, he would come up. The terrain inspired him, and directly. And there in that exhibit, there's, you know, I've gone through all those artifacts, and there's so many stories I couldn't fit in. Like, just for instance, you'll notice in one of the boxes there's a container that says pain. And, you know, most guys, you got to go around carry painkillers in your first aid kit. Well, this, I found out, was not just for the first aid kit. This was because Smoke, as a truck driver for 30 plus years, his back was killing him like a lot. And, you know, there's little anecdotes of, you know, just like any of us, people, not only just physical pain, but there was death, divorce, just challenges. But he took to the mountains and inspired people, like I say, to find their own better nature. And so I have my second-hand and third-hand and fourth-hand accounts, but right now I'm going to then turn over the microphone to people who knew Smoke personally, and we're going to first hear from Jay Jensen. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy, and for putting this all together, and thank you all for coming. It's a great turnout, and it's just great to see you all. So I'm here to represent the local Bishop High School kid who got to know Smoke Blanchard in the late 60s. And if you could imagine going over on to East Willow Street, there's no West Willow Street, by the way. I always thought that was great. So going to Smoke's house on East Willow and sitting there with people like Norman Clyde or Jules Eichhorn, Alan Stack, just Dave Sharp, people that were really a past generation, and I just love the way that our generation can connect with the previous generation, and hopefully we have passed some of that mountaineering lore and maybe even wisdom forward. I felt like it was kind of like a salon, and there was this great amount of discussion, great ideas, and on a personal level, I would say that it had a great effect on my sense of self. Bishop High School kid, I wasn't a football player. I wasn't in Future Farmers of America. I wasn't a beer drinker particularly, and so Dave Sharp would have been a really important influence who introduced many of us, Bill Albright, Gordon Wiltsey, Bill Denton, others as well for sure, to skiing and climbing and adventuring, traveling, just putting that idea out there. And so it led me to feel that I was a mountaineer, that was part of my worldview, part of just really who I am. And although some people went from there to professional mountaineering careers, Gordon notably, Doug Robinson, John Fisher came out of that salon, I'd say. And as an aside, I did have the best job of my life, which was wooden water boy at Palisade School of Mountaineering. I took over for Joe Brennan. That was definitely the pinnacle of my professional mountaineering career, was to fetch wood and water and tag along with the luminaries at Palisade School of Mountaineering. But I just want to speak briefly about Smoke's concept of mild mountaineering. I think in some ways mountaineering has an element of elitism, that we have this superlative attitude that we did the thing that was the hardest or the longest or the tallest or the most miserable or whatever. We think we are doing great things, and so it's kind of accomplishment driven. It's not a bad thing. It's just inherent in mountaineering. It's accomplishment driven. It sort of involves ego, and I can't. Just the end result is the key thing. Oftentimes, but Smoke's approach to mountaineering was to enjoy the process. I spoke to Dave Sharp today, just trying to get some insights into Smoke, and he said Smoke wouldn't choose the hardest route up a mountain if he wanted to climb it. He would choose the most elegant route. So he would want, well, Doug and I would probably go in some dark crevice of steep ice. Smoke would go up a place where it'd go through some forest, and you'd have some easy rock and kick some steps in the snow, chop some steps with your ice axe, and maybe get the rope out. So it made it very approachable. Whereas if I met someone on the street today and I said, "Hey, would you like to climb Mount Williamson tomorrow?" Well, they kind of can't. It's not like you could just go up there, but Smoke would invite someone he met the day before, and so if he said, how about we go out for a little scramble or take a walk in the woods, then that person could go, and they could go in their tennis shoes and their street clothes, and then have a great time, and then, all of a sudden they've been exposed to this great world that we know and love of mountaineering. So it's a populist approach to mountaineering that goes beyond this I'm the greatest guy. I always quote our friend Galen Rowell. He used the phrase, the first to do so. In the American Alpine Journal, it would be typical, he'd say, we climbed the northwest face of Mount Weetabix, the first to do so. Which is great, but so what? So it's more important to enjoy the process, and I really I want to talk about Joe Lane just for a second. That there's this generation forward. So we've got the Norman Clyde, which almost connects to John Muir, and then you got the Bishop kids who No Smoke and Dave Sharp and all these people. And now I think about this, that we pass that on to the next generation. Well, you got Joe who climbs a peak a week, and his crew, and then Bishop kind of turned into a mountain town. It turned into a climbing town, and so I don't think we did that on purpose, but I think there's more buttermilkers right now than there ever were before, and I think that's a great thing. So thank you all for coming. I really enjoy seeing you all, and I'll pass the mic off to Denise Waterbury, I think. Oh, good.
Thanks, Jay. So I'm just going to introduce Denise Waterbury here. Denise will tell us how she was the au pair who helped raise, or maybe largely raised, Smoke's stepchildren, after Smoke's wife Sue died. And so she got to know Smoke really well from kind of the ground floor. And she's got a great little talk.
Thanks, Andy.
Keep the mic real close.
Okay. Check. Hi, everyone. My name's Denise Waterbury, and I was an imported 23-year-old hippie girl from the Bay Area. I lived in Independence in 1974. In 1975, I decided that I needed to move to Bishop, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do that until a close friend of mine who lived in Lone Pine suggested that I contact this man named Smoke Blanchard because he was looking for a nanny to take care of his 2 adopted kids while he traveled the world. He was working for Mountain Travel at the time. And I thought, how in the world could I be a nanny? There's no way. I was 23. I wasn't a mom. But I thought, this might be the ticket to get to Bishop. So I got his phone number, and I called him. And I talked to him for a little bit on the phone, not knowing who he was or anything about him. And he said, well, can you come by tomorrow so I can interview you? And I said, sure. He said, bring your rock shoes with you. And I said, well, I don't have any rock shoes. And he said, well, do you have shoes with Vibram soles? I said, sure. And he said, well, bring those. And I thought that was a little peculiar, but, you know, it was what it was. And so I went to pick him up. I met his 2 adopted kids, Lori and Glenn. They weren't quite as young as I thought they were going to be. They were about 11 and 12 years old. And I think they liked me upon our first meeting. So then Smoke kept egging me on. He said, come on, let's go. We got to go. And I said, where are we going? He said, you'll see. Grab your shoes. And so I grabbed my shoes. He grabbed a rope and some climbing hardware. And we drove up into the buttermilk. I was a little nervous because I didn't know what was going to happen in the buttermilk with his climbing equipment and shoes. But my eyes got really big, you know, when he took them out of the car and we started hiking into the boulders in the buttermilk. So we were hiking through an area that was just gorgeous. Many of you have been there, and the buttermilk's a pretty magical place. We started scrambling through the formations there, and it was really fun. It was really exciting for me because I had never done this before. But as we were going along, things got progressively harder and a lot scarier for me. we started scrambling. We roped up. One of my biggest memories of that day was climbing up through 2 chimneys. And on the second chimney, I got halfway up and I just looked up at smoke and I said, I can't do this. My legs were trembling. I had sewing machine leg. I was exhausted. I'd never done anything like this before. But with a little coaxing and some humorous remarks, he got me up there. And we continued on through his famous rock course in the buttermilk. I think that chimney was actually called the charcoal chimney. I'm not sure, but that's what I remember. So we eventually, several hours later, finished and went back to the car. And I couldn't wait to get home. I was just beside myself, and I couldn't figure out why. Why was he bringing me here? This is an interview? This is insane. I took him home, and he said, well, I have some other people to interview, but I'll call you tomorrow and let you know one way or the other. So I got the call, and he said, Neeser, that's my nickname. Neeser, when can you move in? And so there was my ticket to moving to Bishop. It was interesting living in Smoke's house. He was gone most of the time. He was traveling the world. We were kind of an oddball family. I was the nanny or the big sister to Lori and Glenn, the 2 kids. And then there was this world traveler. Oh, and there was a dog too, my dog Burl. Lori and Glenn were really great kids, and I got to know them, and they took me hiking a lot. We went into Big Pine, North Fork of Big Pine Canyon, because that's where Palisades School of Mountaineering was, and Smoke worked there as a guide. But it's funny because hiking with Lori and Glenn on that trail, I met a lot of interesting people. I met Doug Robinson. I met Galen Rowell. I met Jules Eichhorn and a host of other people, Sarah Steck, who I'm friends with today still after 40-something years. Anyway, the thing that really gets me about Smoke is he practiced Buddhism. And for me, as a 23-year-old, it really affected my life. It affected it then, and it still affects it today. While Smoke was home a lot of times, he was working on his book, Walking Up and Down in the World. But every time he would leave for another country, he left a sheet of paper in his typewriter. And I would use his office to do things in there, to do artwork or whatever. And I always saw that sheet of paper. It appeared when he left. It was gone when he was home. But on that sheet of paper was a phrase written. And the phrase was, unshakable freedom of mind is the goal. Now, I couldn't really realize why he left that there all the time. I didn't know if it was for me or if it was some Buddhist philosophy that he was striving for. But whatever it was, it still sticks with me today. And a lot of times when I'm hiking solo in the desert or in the mountains, it's like a mantra to me, that phrase, unshakable freedom of mind is the goal. And I like to think that Smoke left it there for me. That's my story.
Thanks, Neeser. Okay, I'm just going to introduce the next person we have here who knew Smoke. Victoria Hamilton got to know Smoke really well, and she also has a statement from Keiko Ishikawa. So she's going to read Keiko's statement and then a couple memories or thoughts on on Smoke's legacy that she can share herself. Thanks.
Thank you. How wonderful to be here all together like this. Again. Higher? I cannot imitate Keiko Ishikawa, my good friend and Smoke's good friend, but I will read what she wrote. Greetings from Keiko Ishikawa and from Japan. Congratulations on the successful opening of the exhibition on Smoke Blanchard. I am sure he is smiling at each of you from the top of the mountain somewhere, knowing that people have gathered to talk about his mountaineering history. In the history of mountain climbing in the Sierra region, there are many significant climbers, and I believe that it is very meaningful to include Smoke's climbing experiences in this local museum, as he was a unique and memorable climber and also personally knew a number of early pioneers of mountain rambling. By the time I got to know Smoke, he was very seriously learning to speak some Japanese and spending a lot of time studying Japanese characters. He loved the people and the culture of Japan. He often was amazed by the diligent, sincere, and honest nature of the Japanese people, and he became good friends with many mountain huts owners in the Kita Alps, in the northern part of the Japan Alps. He learned through his friendships that in this small country in the East, people had been leading their lives believing there were gods in all natural things around them, and that there were special mountain gods. You might know that 75% of the land in Japan is mountainous. Over thousands of years, people here have been paying respect to the mountains, thanking them for their grace and their blessings. You will often find shrines on the top of mountains in Japan. This belief impressed Smoke and aligned with his own heart. Oh, let's see. I don't know, but I'll try. Thanks. There's one story Keiko would like to share with you. When Galen Rowell was invited as one of the 100 photographers to participate in the project of a photo book called A Day in the Life of Japan in 1985, he contacted Smoke. Galen had been encouraged by others to go to a mountain in the north where the project leader had arranged to send a movie crew to shoot Galen's Day in Japan for a TV program. On the contrary, Smoke strongly recommended that Galen go to a totally different mountain, Mount Tateyama. Galen followed Smoke's suggestion despite great disappointment from the project leader. When the book was published, Galen's photograph was on the very first page, silhouetting Smoke climbing by a small shrine on the top of the snowy peak. I still remember Smoke's special smiles on that day. I am sure there will be many wonderful stories shared today, and I wish I were there in person to hear and meet with each of you. Thank you, Keiko. Yeah. Okay. I thought of my memories of Smoke as wisps of smoke. What do you think of this thing called chi? Smoke asked as we ambled up a ridge of the Tungsten Hills. Always inquisitive to quietly study the invisible ways of this world while tramping along in his hiking boots. Smoke was the finest friend a person could have. Kind, enthusiastic, courageous, and humorous. I'm so pleased that Andy and the museum have worked so hard to make it possible for those who didn't have the honor of knowing Smoke, to experience his unique character and impact on the Eastern Sierra and beyond. The only Buddhist truck driver west of the Mississippi, cackled Warren Harding when offering me Smoke as a contact before I moved to the Owens Valley as a new teacher. Though Smoke sounded gruff in the first 1 minute of meeting him, we were sipping Darjeeling tea from a battered camping pot and laughing merrily moments later. He was my first friend in the Owens Valley and my best friend for 10 years of adventuring, talking, and appreciating the world. I'm sure many of you here tonight remember his daily wear: olive pants, blue work shirt, rolled at the sleeves, slouch cap, and walking cane. In that humble everyman garb, he often recounted stories of mountains and friends, his blue eyes dramatically widening and his voice quavering to make everyone laugh and appreciate both the grandeur and the foibles of life. Smoke was an inexhaustible and enthusiastic walker. Each day before dawn, he would walk on the Bishop Canal to greet the sun's rising over the mountains and watch for what he called the spotlight effect on peaks. Smoke would make a small bow, his hands in a prayerful gesture. He loved walking more than anything else, I believe. We often walked in the local mountains where he would retell stories Norman Clyde had shared with him in those very same places. Each mountain or walking route in the world was local to Smoke. I'll leave you with a few vivid memories or wisps of smoke which might carry you to further away places which we enjoyed together. I remember walking up Popocatépetl, the Mexican volcano, in what Smoke called our Mexican underwear, the first blue and white striped polypropylene long johns made. He patiently attached the crampons on my boots for the rim walk as I stared out with hypoxic disinterest. That Christmas in Oaxaca, Smoke would always tip his left ear close to the trumpets of the mariachi bands he enjoyed. He loved the steep step walking up Mayan and Aztec pyramids. I remember other Decembers walking day after day in the steep Hong Kong hills and islands. We would return to sip tea and read the paper at the fancy Peninsula Hotel before turning in at the lowly Kowloon YMCA Hotel, once with a wrecking ball shattering its walls as we tried to sleep. Twice our friend Keiko met us there, and we went on to Tokyo to ring in the new year at her cold, snowy home temple. I remember summers walking across the Kita Alps in Japan for 17 days at a time, using the ropes and ladders which took us to sacred peaks. Smoke always intoned, "Easy day," at the end of every day, easy or not. Once in a small hut, shuttered up for a typhoon, Smoke recited long poems for hours in the dark to keep our spirits up. Years later, Keiko and I returned with some of his ashes and left a bit of him on each of his favorite peaks. I remember bicycling many miles to the Imperial Palace in Tokyo across streets, lanes, paths, and highways, scared out of my wits. I don't think we had helmets, but whizzing along behind, hoping for the best outcome. I remember Smoke and I visiting his boyhood haunts in Oregon and climbing Mount Hood in a storm on a day no one else made it or was foolish enough to try it. Descending on icy terrain, he attached me to his string and said, "This will not save you or me, it will remind you to be careful. Smoke shared with many his mountain wisdom, his mountain tales and adventures, and his mountain humility. And this museum exhibit will allow other people to appreciate his qualities and ethics. I surely hope that parts of it will travel to other places to be enjoyed. As a young trucker, Smoke breathed in the terpene fragrances of pines from the open window of the cab of his big rig and was drawn to settle here in the Owens Valley. Experienced something of Smoke at the museum in Independence, but find him napping in the sunlight under a large Jeffrey pine on Grouse Mountain. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me still? Thank you, Victoria. That was awesome. Okay, we have one last speaker here. The bard of Sierra Yosemite climbing, alchemy of action himself, Doug Robinson.
Thank you. Nice wind, huh? I was trying to listen out there and trying hard and thinking, you know, Smoke probably sent this wind to us today. He was afraid that we were going to overdo it. So I hope not. Smoke was the first person that I met in Bishop. Talk about luck. Sheridan Anderson, the alpine cartoonist I'd known for years in Yosemite Valley, and he came to Bishop to start a sign painting shop. And so I came to hang out with Sheridan, and he took me over to Smoke's house. And it didn't stop there, because on the couch was Norman Clyde, couch surfing at Smoke's house, which it turns out was a sort of a habit of his in his later years. So I'm standing in the middle of Smoke's living room 30 seconds after meeting him, and there's Norman Clyde on the couch, and there's this wall of books, which I happened to notice just one shelf in the middle, probably the easiest one to reach, was almost all Chinese and Japanese poetry. And I learned later that Smoke would memorize poems to recite to himself on the road while he was hauling propane up from Fillmore in the winters, so he could have his summers free for the mountains. Nice job for him, huh? He had so many things figured out, boy. And hey, thank you, Andy, for that amazing exhibit in there. I only got to read a few panels, but man, is it well done, huh? We got, you know, Andy wrote really one of the best histories of climbing in North America. I don't know if many of you have even seen it, but take a look. And his skill and really shows in the exhibit. So thank you for that. And Jan, I wish she was here for the amazing photos, and so many from Smokes. I hadn't seen 90% of the images in there. Anyway, I could rave more about the exhibit, but you've all seen it. And I got to come back so that I can actually concentrate on it another day. Wow, all right, Smoke. One thing I realized just making a circuit of that room was that I know this small sliver of Smoke Blanchard's life and what he did because I actually ran into him in the trail in Nepal one time. I couldn't believe it. He was coming the other direction on the trail. I was going in, the only time I've ever been in the Everest region. And here's my neighbor from Bishop coming down the trail. So it was an amazing reunion. So I did get one little sliver of another part of his life, but Japan, I know nothing of. All the work that he did for mountain travel. I actually took one mountain travel trip early on in there when they were working on that. I went to New Zealand, and I loved guiding in the mountains, but I hated holding a dozen passports and going through airports. So that was the end of that for me. So I knew Smoke here, and I got to know him well here. He became a friend right away. He became a mentor, for which I'm immensely grateful. He was my boss at the Palisades School of Mountaineering, and what a kind as well as firm and wonderful boss he was. We had no idea then. It was the first commercial climbing school in California. It was out here in the sticks in Big Pine Canyon, and we didn't know really then. It took me decades later to realize what a high quality outfit it actually was, and what we were doing with students on their third day of ever having a rope on Temple Crag. I still can't believe. Smoke encouraged that, and Don Jensen really was another great mentor, was largely responsible for making that happen too. So that, 10 weeks out of every summer, we got to live at Third Lake, live at Fifth Lake, live in Sam Mac Meadow. We'd only run down the trail once in a while to do laundry, really, and to go to Saturday night at Rusty's. But how lucky to be able to live up there and do that. Oh, okay, thanks. I can hear myself. Sorry. But so I want to talk about Smoke and the buttermilk for a minute, because that's where I knew him best, and I think it's it's only a fraction of the local part of his legacy, but it's the part that I know the best. So have at it for a minute here. How did Smoke even get here? I read about it in the exhibit. I'd like to know even more about what drove him down here in 1937 to come here and then meet Norman Clyde, and the rest of it I kind of get. But I got here after spending years in Yosemite Valley, and Smoke went to Yosemite, took one look around and went nope, and came to the east side. Turns out Norman Clyde did that too. I think that's kind of interesting. Both of them just like bounced off the place. Sign of quality. It's the Gulch. It's okay, but it's actually pretty good. But this is the east side. But Smoke's not completely responsible for what happened here for him with him, because it's the east side, because this terrain is absolutely incredible. And he was a guy who had his eyes open and could see where he was, and he went out to the buttermilk right away, and yeah, he became Bishop's first rock climber. But boy, he invented a kind of climbing out there, scrambling in the rock course that still bears his name, that is totally unique in the world. There's nothing like it anywhere else. And it's not just Smoke. Yeah, he came there and he saw it and he developed it, and it's amazing. But it's also that terrain that's out there that is like this square mile of sort of head 'em off at the pass, blind alley canyons, and it's an amazing place. And the guy saw that and made carved out of it a totally unique experience for everyone, and it almost went away. And I was off living in Santa Cruz, raising kids, and by that time, and thinking, oh, someday I'll corral John Fisher, my old climbing buddy, and get him to show me around the rock course again, because I've kind of forgotten. And then John suddenly died, and a bunch of us, not a bunch, but a very few of us looked at each other and went, we got our work cut out for us here, because we have to re-find Smoke's rock course and be able to pass it on. And it took a dozen years for a small handful of people to accomplish that. And I'm proud to say that we've got it like almost nailed. There's this one section, anyway, I won't go on about that, but I think I got that piece figured out now too. But it's taken, I was up there last fall trying to figure out where Smoke had gone right after the big slab pinnacle and then going into the backside, in case some of you remember that. And I went up there for several days, and we found a way that we could take people through it. And I knew it wasn't Smoke's way, and it was not as elegant, and I'd still get lost trying to do it. But I'm still lost trying to, I think I'm 98% sure that I know where Smoke went through there, but there's a couple of sections that I don't really feel like climbing by myself. You know, I'd like to have a spot and maybe a rope, and that's so typical of what the place is. Smoke was a badass climber. I took him a pair of modern rock shoes one time. Some of you know this story, and I thought, oh well, this is going to blow him away, you know. And they fit him, and he tried them out, and then he brought them back, and he said, "Thanks, no, I like my lug-soled boots." He was so good with them. Anyway, buttermilk stories. I could go on and tell a bunch more, but I am glad to be here to honor my friend, my boss, my mentor, and thank you, Smoke.